Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Understanding More About Our Health. And we're here with Dr. Lois Nahirni. And we recently had, both Dr. Sonia and I recently had our DNA tested. And I was skeptical of DNA testing in the past because I'm always looking at things from a lifestyle perspective and epigenetic factors and detox and fasting, all the things we can do to change the expression of our DNA. And I didn't fully realize the power of understanding why this is so important to look at your predisposition, because in knowing this, you do have power in understanding more about your DNA. So Lois is going to walk us through some of my test and what to look for, the things that you need to see and the things that are really important, and why we're now understanding why this is such an important test for everybody to know more about themselves. So welcome to this episode here, this talk.
Thanks very much, Nick. Glad to be here. Thanks.
So we're gonna, we want to explain a little bit for people why this is so important. We mentioned before that maybe people just need to start here so you get a fuller picture of what's actually happening for someone. A lot of times when we're doing tests, we're tracking progress with something, but a DNA test is something you only do once, right?
That's right. So the really interesting thing about DNA testing is it's your biological roadmap. And so we've never had the opportunity before to be able to have this window in to our bodies to understand the code that we were given and where that code is strong and where it's weak. And so now we can have that information to help inform us. You only do it once. All of the other testing that's available is important, but it tells you where you are today. What your DNA can tell you is what was the roadmap you were born with and where are the areas over your entire lifetime that you want to be most careful about because you might not have inherited the optimum set of genetics around it. And so what we do is we look at the best studied genes that most commonly apply to lifestyle and preventative health. And so this research is now out there in this exploding time of new genetic information. And what we wanted to do is to be able to put that into people's hands, because we're finding so many people who are having health issues, and I'm sure you must have with your patients, where we can't find the solution or it's tricky to find. And what this does is give you yet another set of a really important foundational, almost the first piece of data that you should have to try to start saying, where should we be looking to try to find where I might be having health problems now, or where, if you're being preventative, which is how we like it the best, that these are the areas that I need to essentially be careful about and protect over my lifetime to make sure that they don't become the weaknesses that show up.
Yeah, that's so important, because so many of us realize in this space of alternative medicine that it's not about stopping an illness, it's not even about reversing, but it's really our best foot forward is in prevention. And so if we know our inherent weaknesses up front, we talk about knowing our gaps, like where are we not paying attention? When you can shine a light on where your weaknesses are and your strengths, you can be so much more proactive and preventative. And I like what you said the other day when we spoke, and that's your plan is to age gracefully up until 120, and who knows what else comes after that. But this is a very powerful longevity tool, because you're stopping things before they start by knowing where your weaknesses are.
Exactly. So we seem to think we've been trained that we just start, the metabolism slows down. We might be getting more sick as we hit our 50s, 60s, 70s. But the reality is you can keep your cell healthy. And so the thing is just having enough information about what specifically are the areas that my body needs the most support in. And so I absolutely credit being involved in this business with the fact that I'm healthier. I know I'm going to live longer, and I'm setting some pretty lofty goals out there, and really trying to follow a lot that we study and learn in genetics and in the epigenetic side, which is so important. And just to say, DNA is your roadmap, but it's not your destiny. It is the code you've been given, but epigenetics sits on top of DNA, and it's how it tells your DNA how to express itself. And so your epigenetics are basically lifestyle. It's things like diet, which is probably the most important, exercise, sleep, stress, toxins, the environment that you're in. Those are kind of the factors that trigger your DNA to respond in different ways. And so if you know where your DNA is weak, then those are the ones you try and protect and really support. And then your body's going to have everything that it needs.
Mm-hmm. You also shared an interesting story the other day when when you talked about, you're doing everything right, you're exercising, you're eating the right food, and there were still areas that were not performing well, and there was just this slow onset of deteriorating quality of life that so many people are unfortunately stuck in. They're stuck in the state of just the boiled frog mechanism of getting used to symptoms, getting used to things declining. Can you speak to that a little bit of like, sometimes it goes beyond diet and exercise and looking on the surface for health. Like we have to go inside, and looking at your DNA is a mechanism to do that as well.
Well, exactly. So on the surface, I would have looked healthy in my 40s, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So I had restless leg syndrome, I had chronic fatigue, I had menstrual issues, had never been able to get pregnant. We adopted children. But the scariest one for me was I couldn't pull a full breath. I was always short of breath. And I went to doctors for 4 years. I tried everything I could come up with. I was trying to eat well, exercise, but nothing was working. And it wasn't until I ended up in this, new company, getting my DNA results back, that the genetics looked at vitamins and minerals. And it shows that I'm genetically weak on vitamin Bs. And I'd never taken vitamins or supplements, didn't believe in them. Thought I was doing the right stuff. And I'm genetically weak on Bs, which is a very common variation in our population. About 40% of people can have that. And it really starts to manifest, especially in your 40s and on, and for women after that age too. And so it turns out all I needed to do was supplement with methylated complex vitamin Bs, particularly in my case, because we can see which gene is doing what. I need B9s or folate, and I'm fine. So 4 years of being, ultimately ended up being admitted to hospital for blood transfusions because I was that sick. And here, all it took, nobody asked me about my nutrition. Nobody had a conversation about that. It happened to be this little lurking thing for me, which was around vitamin Bs. And as soon as I started taking them, my hormones balanced, and I'd been slowly putting on weight because I couldn't manage my metabolism. And all I needed was, that was my key to better health. And it gave me lots of other insights too into, I gotta manage my caffeine. Oh, some of my stress is because I'm drinking too much of that and I don't metabolize it. And lactose, well, you can get away with a bit, but you know what? That's actually, as soon as I pulled that back, between the Bs and the lactose, the 10 pounds I gained just dropped off.
It's amazing.
And I have to tell you, I actually just did a presentation today, and one of the people there who's known me for years said, "You've never looked better. You've never, you're looking healthy." I feel so fabulous, and it's because I'm actually eating and supporting my body's DNA to be able to be its best.
That's incredible. I mean, that story is so powerful, and it just brings a level of awareness to sometimes making these changes in our lives don't have to be massive, and if we're already doing the right things and still, the right things in quotation marks, yet there's still issues, this gave you a window into an insight that you never would have known had you not done this. So it's a powerful
there's no
message.
blood testing that could show up my particular area of weakness in the Bs, or no blood testing in North America that's commonly done.
Yeah, it's true. And what I was talking about this with my wife Sonia earlier today, just as a starting point, I mean, you could look at blood work, you could look at even urine hormone testing to look at methylation issues in different kinds of ways. But at the end of the day, that's still an effect. Like, it's still a response that your body's under. If you don't know the underlying matrix for why you may not be processing your Bs or well, even looking at micronutrient levels, at the end of the day, these are all effects of absorption and uptake and everything else. But underneath all that is your inherent weaknesses or strengths. So it's a beautiful place to start. Absolutely. So we're gonna dive into my test a little bit, right?
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna share the screen here. I'm sorry, I just got to pull it up and find it here. There we go. I've got them all pulled up. Just looking for it. There we go. And I'm sharing it. So can you see that on your screen, Nick?
Yep.
And hopefully everybody else can as well. So I'll go just to the start of the report. So we test we have 4 different areas of testing that we look at. And what we did is we've done all the research on everything that's available on research that's been done on genetics, specifically related to the factors that we can do the most with, because that's what will impact our long-term health. And then we put them in, we're making it available to you. So we have diet is the most important. This is the foundational one. We'll also then take a look at health, fitness, and brain. So there's 4 different areas that we group the tests into, but the first overall is the diet. And so we're going to take a look here. We give you a bit of an overview about why DNA is important, how these genetic variations impact our health, and how we look at them, and why it's, you know, the testing is phenomenal these days, super reliable. And then just how you should use it. And we really recommend that people work with someone like yourself, Nick, to dive into it, to look at working with your whole health. But take this data and then create a big plan. Perfect. Okay, great.
Okay.
Good. So Nick, hopefully you can see my screen here. I'm going to help walk through some of your results. Now we test in 4 different areas, and diet is the foundational, the most important, because that really is the key to our health. But we'll then walk through a health report, a fitness, and a brain as well. So when you get your results, it comes in these 4 different areas. There's over 70 areas that we test. And we start out with telling you why your DNA results are important to you, just in terms of being your biological roadmap. Very reliable testing, stunning quality in terms of the lab results that we get. We have just a world-class lab that services hospitals out of Toronto. We just love it. And get a bit of a summary of what you can expect. There's a lot of information. It's over 60 pages long, but you really just need to look to get at the snapshot to get started. And then you only need to dive into the areas that are important for you. So here's the start. So we start by looking at diet management overall, looking at kind of macronutrients. So we're looking at carbohydrates, insulin, cholesterols, fats, and proteins. And when I see your results, you take a look. Green is good, and red is where you have genetic variations. It doesn't mean bad, it just means you've got genetic variations, so you're going to be at a higher predisposition or risk in those areas. If it's 50% red or more, those are the areas to focus on. On the rest, generally speaking, your strong and good genes will just manage the process the way it should. So here you can see you actually have one of the better macronutrient profiles I've seen in a long time. It means that you probably can get away with eating most anything. You're one of those people that can be annoying for some of us who have to be far more careful about what we have to eat. But you can see here you've got a lot of green. It means you've got good carbohydrate genes. Your insulin manages well. Cholesterol is good. Your fat genes are all strong, doing what they need to. So you probably can get away with most diets.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see
this is an interesting point here, because so many people get stuck on, this is how I'm supposed to eat. This is the new diet. This is what I need to follow. And this just really lays it out as to how your body's handling all types of foods. So this is powerful information.
Absolutely. We regularly see people that'll have a lot more red on carbohydrates. So that's a problem area for them to be, so they should be a low carb diet. If you're really red on fats, you should be on a lower fat diet. And so when people say, oh, should I do a keto diet, for example, we'll say it depends. It depends what your genes are. If you have really strong fat genes, you could do great on that diet. But if you don't, we've seen some people get very sick on it over time. It works for a while, but it can be very, very hard on your body, because if your genes can't process the fat properly, what are they going to do with it? It doesn't go through your system properly. It doesn't break down, and odds are it'll turn into some sort of an inflammation or a concern. So that's what we're looking for here. You've got, again, a really great panel. You'll see you're a bit redder here on protein need. It just means that you're one of the people who probably does better in your case with a bit more protein, but smaller portions spaced out in order to be sure that you absorb it in the best way for your body.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about, animal versus, being really, really conscious, because there's a little more stress here too, that being really conscious of the types of protein as well, right?
Yes. Yes. So meat products are more inflammatory, certainly, than anything else that you're going to eat. Do I support? I'm an advocate of vegan and vegetarian diets, but for everybody, I say it depends. I prefer to be vegetarian or vegan, but because of the issue I have with bees, I do better having some meat in my diet. So I have a modest, clean portion of meat that I will have as part of my diet. And I have a similar result right on as you do on protein need. I actually need the protein, and it doesn't access as easily as it should. So I do also a lot of other forms of protein just to be sure I'm getting what my body needs.
That's
Great.
great.
Okay, good. So this is the macronutrient profile. Usually we've got, again, the good news for you is you can get away with quite a lot of different diets. So lucky Nick.
I get to experiment with all of them, the zone, the keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, all of it.
Exactly. And this one here is body mass index. You're not prone to having, there's a lot of genes that are linked into obesity. Again, have a good set of genes there.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a look at the next profile. It's on food tolerances. A couple more things show up here for you though. If you take a look at caffeine, 50% red, lactose 50% red, and salt 75%. Caffeine, odds are you're probably better off with this profile just having 1 cup of coffee a day or spacing them out because the caffeine doesn't metabolize as easily and it'll layer on top of each other. So, a normal metabolizer, it'll metabolize in an hour or two. Yours will stay in your body a lot longer. So 1 cup of coffee a day should be fine. Taking a look at lactose, well, that's kind of in between. When you've got that type of a profile, you can probably get away with having some lactose, but you want to be a bit careful. You want to be moderate at how much you include in your diet. And if you find that you're starting to get some inflammation or are putting on weight, you'd want to pull that back because it might be one of the areas that's having an impact. And then you'll see salt is quite red. You need to be careful about salt. And it's interesting, I'm going to bump down here. These are food taste and preferences. You are very red on salt taste, which means you don't taste it all that well. And you actually have a preference for it. It's how well, you don't metabolize it that well. So when you don't taste it, our body does like salt. You might crave it more. But you'll need to be very careful. We need salt, but only use sea salts, mineral salts, whole salts. I recommend for most people, please don't buy, table salts and sodium salts. Really look for a high quality sea salt or mineral salt to use. So you'd want to be careful in how you use your sea salt use your salts because they may contribute to blood pressure, which we're going to see in another report a little bit later. And then the rest of the panel here looks good. These are just food tastes and preferences. Interesting, caffeine preference is red. When it's all green, it means it's normal. When it's red, it means something is either higher or lower. And in your case, you may enjoy more caffeine, but you really shouldn't have too much.
Okay, I was going to ask about that. So that's more what that means when there's probably a higher preference, but my body's just, as it shows up there, it's not metabolizing it well. So it's not, I shouldn't indulge in that preference.
Correct. And it's really interesting that there are actual genes that indicate a preference for caffeine, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And when those are off, and it had probably attracted us to things that we needed in certain parts of our, in our ancestors' past. But when you understand that, then it might help you understand why you're attracted to certain foods or not.
So this is interesting because if we look back in our genealogy, mine is more Northern European, and maybe there was just already a significant amount of salt in the foods because ocean kind of dwelling and that kind of thing, and so maybe that's part of why it's in some of the genetic history. Where in Sonia's, hers was also high too. But is there any? Do you see any correlation with like where that genealogy goes and some of these foods, maybe not just salt?
Yes, and whether it's on this one or not, I actually can't tell you that. But yes, there is definitely, it tracks well back though, that our genetics were geared to the food supplies of the places where our ancestors came from. And they had to adapt, and the genes adapted in order to be able to respond to either too much or too little of what was available in the environment. We now are ethnically more blended than we've ever been before, and our food is as international as it's ever been. And so we have these bodies that have got a unique combination of genetics plus food from all over, and as a result there's some stuff that our bodies are better at having and some that it isn't. And it's harder to know now because we're not coming as clearly from a certain part of the world with clear genetics on that particular adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also use the example of, my wife being from Southern Asia or India. There's a lot higher populations of people from that part of the world that are experiencing diabetes and early onset cardiovascular disease. And a lot of it comes down to because of these dietary changes, right?
Yes, in fact, when we looked at Sonia's, or I took a look at hers, if she eats a standard North American diet, the odds of her having weight gain, or there could be responses on her carbohydrates, insulin, and her likelihood of it impacting her weight would be high. And so she mentioned that she is vegetarian. That's the diet that her genetics show is best for her. Okay, great. So we'll take a look just at the next page here because I want to be sure we get to go through everything here, Nick. So this is a snapshot of the vitamin panel. And again, yours isn't too bad. You can see a little bit of the red here on B6 and B9. So maybe over your lifetime, there might be some support needed if you're not getting it out of your food, or you feel it's not absorbing. A little bit weak on vitamin Ds, but really, again, not too bad. You're really quite strong on your whole diet panel overall. And so when we look at this, does that mean you shouldn't have vitamins? Well, I'm actually an advocate now that everybody, based on what I've learned and seen in my own experiences with so many of our clients over time, is that our food supply is not delivering what it needs in terms of the amount of nutrients it had 50 years ago. In some cases, the nutrients are 20 to 80% less than 50 years ago. And so even if we're eating a healthy diet, it is still harder to get all of the nutrients that we need. And so I am an advocate for taking high quality supplements because there's a lot of not great stuff on the market as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that because so many people get stuck in this, thing that we started this conversation on, is that's looking at health on the outside. I can get everything through my diet, I can get everything through exercise and that kind of thing. And we know that there's soil depletion, there's an abundance of toxicity that we're all struggling with. And we're not just talking about surviving anymore, we're talking about thriving, optimizing, but also treating targeted deficiencies. And it's really hard to do that just with diet alone.
Yes, absolutely. And you're exactly right. So I generally will recommend that everybody, regardless of knowing their DNA, because here's your map of which ones are most important for you. But for most people, I would say take a multi, take a D if you're living in a northern climate like we are. Omegas are so important for protecting our brain, getting high quality fats to support our brain health. And Bs, if you are under stress, feeling fatigued, just to provide that boost for how it helps your cells manage energy. So from here, the reports give you an action plan, and just giving you a bit more here. So the places that you were high red is where you'll see some action set up. So we do this so that people can photocopy it, take it out of the book, put it up on their wall, print it, and remind themselves about what are the habits that I need to maintain. And so for yours, again, you've got a great profile. The message is you can eat pretty well, but for protein need, you should have smaller, more frequent amounts of proteins, which are easier for your body to digest. So plant-based proteins, such as beans, lentils, peas, quinoa, fish, cottage cheese, eggs, protein powders, nuts, seeds, and sea vegetables. Those are great things. So, having a bowl of nuts or seeds, by your desk to snack on a bit more often would provide the opportunity for your body to be absorbing more optimally the protein that is ideal for you to perform at your best. And then here, under lactose, consider reducing or avoiding, reduce some of your caffeine and salt. You want to think about limiting your intake. So recommendations on your specific test are provided there. Then on the next page here, we've got a couple of vitamins that based on your results, you might want to be considering. And so what you'll see here is there's a corresponding page behind that's listed. So you don't need to go through the 60 pages. What we would do is if you want to learn more about vitamin B6, we just flip all our way through here to page 40. And you can learn a little bit more about it on that page, just to read a bit more about what are some other things for dietary sources of vitamin B6 that you might want to take, some more dietary sources of B9, since that was, those two are important for you. So wherever possible, we want to encourage you to get that out of your food, and then you can booster and supplement that with vitamins.
Yeah, I love how easy it is to read, and all the resources there. It's so much easy to read and useful information for people. And anyone can get this test, and they can also get consultation once they receive the test. And so much of it's easy to follow just with how it's set up. So it's
Right.
really nice. Yeah.
But it's great. We like to walk people through it just so that you're clear on what you're reading, because it's new for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will have done 23andMe and they'll ask, well, what's the difference? Well, 23andMe focuses on genealogy. We don't do that. A number of rare diseases, and there are just a very few areas that overlap with our 70 areas, like one bitter taste gene, one lactose gene. We test for two because that's what you need, is both to really know. And a couple things on body mass index, but that's pretty much most of it. And I might be missing one or two. When you really want to look at preventative health, that's what you do. You go here to understand, what do I need to do to know my personal body's roadmap for day-to-day health, because day-to-day health is what will influence all of the other factors in your body.
Yeah, it's so functional, and like you said, when you're doing tests like 23andMe, and this is, I think, maybe where some of my skepticism was that you're looking at all these like illnesses that affect such small percentages of the population. It becomes non-functional, and it's just easy to get lost in all this data, where this is like actually giving you foundational tools. You can take a functional approach to what's going on, and you're focusing on the big things that affect most people. So it's beautiful.
Exactly.
Love it.
Yeah. So we've got your recommendations are, manage smaller, more frequent plant-based protein would probably help your body, lower caffeine and lactose, and consider a multivitamin or a B, depending, that to maybe supplement. So, pretty simple. And now that's actually a lifetime roadmap for you. So Nick, we're going to move over and take a look at health. This Health Power report, what it does is it looks at some background functions that are critical, and people will recognize these terms because you'll have heard about it in popular press, because it does impact our health. So things like detoxification, hormone health, inflammation, and methylation. Maybe not as many people know about methylation, but it's actually critically important to how your cell manages its energy and supports the functioning of your body. So just a really important underlying function that we've learned a lot more about in the last few years. So again, you've got pretty strong results here. Your detoxification is good. A little bit of support could be used in terms of some antioxidant enzymes, and we'll look at that in terms of the recommendations. So just a little bit of support. Odds are, if you exercise, you'll detox normally. For some people, we see that these are quite red or blocked. If they knew that, they'd know how important detoxifying is for them to get those toxins out of their body, because it doesn't naturally eliminate as easily as it should. If we look here at hormone health, one area is how your body regulates the sex steroids. And so you just need to be a little bit more careful about what goes into your body, because it doesn't regulate as well. So that is, if you're eating meat, how do you make sure it's hormone-free, antibiotic-free, because your body doesn't regulate that and might misread some of those external factors if they get introduced. And we'll look at the recommendations there. But of all of your reports, it's the next area that flagged for me the most. And you have an excellent set of genetics. You should be healthy, but this one here for me was interesting. Inflammatory immune response, quite red. That says to me that you're probably more subject to inflammation, and you've got to be careful about that, because we know inflammation is a critical contributor to chronic disease. So I was surprised to see that. Do you have any comments on that one, Nick, in terms of whether you've seen yourself overreact at all in an inflammatory way?
Yeah, that's been my whole childhood. Is it the atopic kid, allergies, asthma, chronic ear infections? Everything was about inflammation. My eczema, everything. When I was out of balance, and I used to eat a ton of dairy back in the day too. My lactose genes weren't fantastic. I remember drinking, cartons of milk and whatnot. And so how it would play out my body, it would just flare my skin, and I'm used to react to peanuts, and my whole body would flare up. So there's this massive inflammatory immune process that's at play, and whenever I go off my strategies, that's how it shows up for me. So it was really illuminating to see that.
Well, and you know what's interesting when you get your DNA results is sometimes you'll go, oh, well, I didn't know that. Sometimes go, well, that's interesting, but and other times when you see this, you'll go, oh, that is confirmatory of the experience I've already had in my lifetime. Where here I'm this healthy guy, and yet when I did something like too much milk, which we saw as an irritant for you, it comes out in your skin. That's where this is around your immune system fighting inflammation. And that does tend to be more on the surface. So my kids are quite red here. And when they get a mosquito bite, they flare up like crazy. So they're just, it's a real problem for them when they hit those inflammatory responses. That makes sense. And so as a result, you need to be careful about things that cause or trigger inflammation for you, because that'll just affect your health overall.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so valuable. And it allows me, speaking of prevention, allows me to focus more on that. I can really be mindful of keeping those things that are triggers for me at bay, because we know that one of the biggest underlying processes for all illnesses is an inflammatory one. So it is important for me to be really proactive here.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And then the last area here is methylation. Again, that's just kind of how your cells manage this process of energy. It's almost, sometimes it's called the energy of the cell. And yours is, again, not too bad, but there's a couple of areas where the B12 might not always be doing what it needs to be doing to support that process as effectively as possible. If you're eating healthy, I would say you wouldn't have a problem, but it's how does it do these conversions? Is it strong? And if it's not, then a methylated B, could be the answer for you.
Yeah, and this is such an important topic too, because we see a ton of people that come in and we read their B12 levels in serum, which is kind of a waste of time, but it gives us a little bit of a snapshot into a possibility. But you're getting so much more information, and what happens in the regular conventional medical models? What do they give? They give you cyanocobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, things that your body can't even utilize. So, that's why this kind of stuff is so important. The details.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And because the blood results can't give you a full picture of this, like your blood results won't show you a complete B6, B9, B12 pattern. You have to have very careful tests, but that's currently not how it's tested here in Canada and to some degree in the US as well. So your blood results are really important. They'll give you some information, but it varies. And so knowing whether there is actually a foundational genetic issue around that will give you more confidence around those results that you're getting from blood, and either confirm it or give you other areas just to search more. So when we look here at recommendations, then we're saying, okay, just for that one part of detoxification, you can get vitamins that are, this is superoxide dismutase, and what it is it's just a great, it just helps with oxidative protection. So maybe a little bit of extra could help, or include some turmeric or manganese or foods that are rich in antioxidants, berries, pecans, artichokes. So some good examples of foods to make sure they're in your diet, because they support that one area that might be just a little bit weaker in your body. Same with looking at the biosynthesis of the androgens and estrogens. So it might have bigger issues. So if you're eating meat, hormone-free meat and dairy, you don't want to be adding more into your body. Make sure there's no herbicides, pesticides. So eating clean becomes even more important and organic. Use glass, not plastic. Now, for some of us, we should all be doing that just because it is healthier. We're now learning about how much microplastics, and it's less stable and it's in our bodies. In fact, there was a study this last week that was released in the news that belugas in the Arctic, they tested them, and they all have microplastics in them. And so we have to pull this out of our diet anywhere, or our exposure to it anywhere we can get it. So it's just a good reminder to, especially if your genetics are weak, because that can trigger longer term health effects. So inflammation, you want to be having lots of vitamin C, turmeric, garlic, onion, berries, fish oil. That supports your inflammatory response, keeps you strong, boosts this gene that's weak, which is interleukin-6, helps it remain strong. And then finally, around vitamin Bs, foods would be in them, but maybe some supplementation might help, especially if you're feeling a little bit tired or run down, just to boost that methylation process. So that's, again, there's more details right throughout the report to read in more about it, but we give you that information. I want to be sure we cover off the last two areas as well for you, Nick. So we're moving into the fitness report. So here we look at a number of different areas. We work with lots of fitness trainers to help make sure that you are customizing your workout for optimum results. And you just get results a little bit quicker and easier when you know how you're genetically made up. Now on endurance and power and sprint, they are mutually exclusive. So the greener you are on one, the redder you'll be on another. The fact that it's pretty balanced here says you probably can do both endurance and you can do power and sprint. What do you find you like doing for exercise, Nick?
Yeah, I like both. It's funny. I mean, I used to play college basketball, and basketball is my entire life, so a ton of endurance and I mean, I love spending time in the gym as well. So I feel that sort of balanced yin and yang type of exercise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then we look here, and which is good for you. Your ligament and tendon strength aren't bad, but as you age, you might want to do a bit more warm up just to be sure you don't tax the tendons too much, that they stay strong. And you'll see here your muscle strength is a little bit. It's interesting. It's just when somebody has this profile, it's like you don't have to. You're probably going to build lean muscle more than you will bulk muscle. And you don't want to be killing yourself with weights. You want more longer, lighter, longer sets will probably give you a better results than really just killing yourself, because the strength isn't always there, and you want to build it up a little bit more gradually. But the good news is you repair well. So even if you do go hard, you repair pretty well and it should be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, how important is this? I mean, you kind of joked about this as well. But when people are starting out with a trainer, or you're working out, and trainers have, each one obviously has different personality. They have a different liking to how they work with you. But if they're blasting you with heavy weights and low reps or whatever, and it doesn't actually work for your repair mechanisms, your body's ability to put on muscle, I mean, again, another application for where this is so important.
Exactly. That was my problem. I would work because I was a corporate executive. I had a trainer. I'd work with them. But there's funny people who are strong power sprint people tend to be the higher percentage of people who go into personal training. And so they would train me according to what worked for them, which is doing, heavy weights, shorter sets, really going for fatigue. And my body was just not built that way. And it was so discouraging. It felt wrong for me. I didn't like it. So I just, you do it for a while and then just stop doing it. And so for those of us who are, recreational athletes just trying to stay strong, once we shifted to lighter weights, longer sets, I'm going, this works for me. I feel good. I like doing it. And I was more motivated to stay with it. For people who are competitive athletes, because we work with a lot of bodybuilders, it allows them to refine their program in a way that they can't do quite as easily. So we really try to refine based on that. So then if we look here, exercise performance, the one flag for you is blood pressure. And we saw that salt was also an issue for you. So you'll just want to watch as you age that you are managing that pressure appropriately for your body. You're young enough now that it probably isn't showing up, but this is the thing to say, Nick, an area that you want to be more aware of is watching your blood pressure when you work out as you age, or if you're not in good health, because it is an area that might be of higher risk for you. So knowing that just gives you a bit more insight. Here, energy availability. People who are red here should eat before a workout. People who have great green energy metabolism means when you work out, you get great value. You metabolize your food well when you work out, so you should be going for it. And then we look at oxygen uptake. You've got a good VO2 max. And then here, no issues on blood sugar and insulin. Not really an issue. The cardiovascular health, this is probably that bit of that salt response showing up, really not a particular risk. So then we give you some recommendations here. Just make sure you monitor your blood pressure and just manage do more gradual building of your strength rather than, so look after your strength and nurture it. And that's it on your your fitness plan. And then moving finally into brain. Here, I was really interested in this panel, Nick, because I wanted to know if I was at risk for Alzheimer's. Because we're discovering that Alzheimer's is more diet related than we ever thought. It's a disease based on lifestyle. Alzheimer's was not a big thing in the populations 50 years ago because we had a cleaner level of eating. And some people are calling Alzheimer's the type 3 diabetes. So I absolutely believe that people should learn about what is your genetics. Are you at higher risk? And even if you are, you absolutely through diet can keep that risk at bay so that it does not impact you in your lifetime at all. And that's really the goal of all of this, is to be able to work around where your body needs it most. Now, Alzheimer's and concussion are closely linked. And so yours are really quite fine. That's not a problem, completely normal. What I'm seeing here, you're not at a high risk. But it was interesting for me, Nick, when I got my results, turns out I wasn't at risk of Alzheimer's. But when I got my kids' results, super high risk. And my kids are adopted. So for me, this is super important to learn about their inherent body response, because I don't have any background that I might be able to intuit it from. And so they're very red on Alzheimer's, also on concussion. And both of them suffered a concussion when they were young. And I saw how poorly they were responding for recovery. If you're very red in these areas, you want to do all the concussion protocols you can as quickly as possible. You don't want to leave it. You want to be providing support. And I actually made the decision to pull my kids out of contact sports so that they didn't run a risk of having any trauma to the brain, any brain injury that they might struggle in terms of recovery.
And that's powerful information as a parent, right? I mean, especially
Yeah.
if your kids are in soccer or football or, hockey, any areas where there's repetitive, chance for trauma. So it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And then we look here at cortisol, depression, emotional eating, Parkinson's, no issue for you. And so we've kind of, that's it. So there won't even be any recommendations even for you there, because nothing to mention. But, so there we've got this snapshot, 70 areas that we've looked at. We've got kind of, a few that are important. The one for you, Nick, is inflammation and managing that well. And then just, being moderate on lactose, maybe taking some vitamins, watching your B's, and just supporting eating cleanly as much as possible, especially meats. And you know what? You will be supporting your genetics, and you will be able to, for sure, I'm sure of it, live a longer, healthier life.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the plan. I mean, we just turned 40 this year, both Sonia and I, and so it was very, timely that we got this information, and we're in the middle of creating our longevity lab, which is all about not just living longer, but living better, more vitality, more energy, more tools for our prevention. And this was, the perfect timing. And it was so interesting for me. I mean, my mom had a stroke. I can't wait to do her test. Otherwise, my dad's healthy as a horse, no major issues. My grandma had Parkinson's. It's interesting to see that, just because something shows up in your family line doesn't mean that you also have those same genetic tendencies. So to get this information, obviously we still have to take care of things, still have to support our lifestyle and whatnot, but just to have a little bit more emphasis on areas where I need to put emphasis, and maybe not can be too concerned with things that just because they are in my family line doesn't mean they're actually showing up in my genes. So
yeah, exactly. And when
amazing.
you know that, it can kind of put your mind at ease, and it doesn't mean, and so it just means don't worry about genetically, but you still have to practically be managing your health. Some conditions can be acquired. And so we see, just as a note, a lot of people, lots of people who have gut issues, but gluten, lactose impacts 75% of the population. Gluten is really only about 20-25% at most that have a genetic issue. A lot of the issues are around our gut and the grains and GMO and other products that we've been having that have caused weaknesses in our gut biome. And so those are more acquired, and if they're acquired, are easier to heal and to solve.
It's awesome. So, I mean, basically people are going to want to take advantage of this test. You've graciously given a deal for our clients and people who work with us through our clinic. And so I'm going to put on a code on this video so people can access that. And I want people to be able to access more of your information and follow you. So it's a dnaPower.com, right?
Correct. Yes. And we're at dnaPower Inc. on the social media platforms. People will have a link on your website or this podcast, where they can click on it and be able to order it. And we'll have a code for you to get $100 off the test.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. It's so gracious of you guys. You're doing an amazing job at helping to change the trajectory of health for this planet. And so we're honored to work with you, and we're excited, and we love the results. We hope this gets in more people's hands. So
terrific. You know what I love about it is you only do it once. It's your
yeah,
roadmap. It's what's with you. It's something you keep reminding yourself about, and it just helps you steer in the direction that is best for your body.
it's amazing. So there you go, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I might even chunk this up into different videos so that people can watch each one, on its own. But such amazing information. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And yeah, we'll see more of you very soon, I'm sure.
Terrific. Well, happy health. Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you.